Hello, and welcome back to Lacrim Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1, I like to go on long walks at night. I started doing it in early high school, back when I still had the kind of energy that made sleep feel optional. Some nights I would just leave the house and wander for hours with no real plan, letting my feet pick streets for me. In the fall, the air would finally cool down enough to feel sharp and clean. In the summer, Florida would turn into a wet oven. The heat didn't sit on your skin so much as it wrapped around you, like you were walking through warm water. Most of those walks weren't about exercise. They were about thinking. They were about staying busy so my mind wouldn't chew on the same feelings in the same room every night. A lot of the time, I thought about her. It makes me feel embarrassed now, remembering how intense it was, but I guess I was a kid, and kids don't know how to do anything halfway. I talked to her all the time. I watched for her at school. I spent way too much effort trying to earn a tiny piece of her attention. Like if I got her to laugh or reply quickly, it meant something bigger was finally starting. And honestly, I thought it was working. Not perfectly, not like a movie, but enough that I let myself hope. She died on one of those nights. It was one of those sticky summer nights that makes the sky feel low and heavy, like you could reach up and smear your hand through the darkness. The air was so humid it felt like breathing through a damp towel. While she was on the ground somewhere, already gone, I was out walking and thinking about nothing important. My shoes tapping along the pavement like I had all the time in the world. I remember one detail too clearly: the smell. That night, the air smelled like rotten eggs, sulfur, a harsh, sour stink that didn't belong in our neighborhood. I kept glancing around as I walked, trying to find the source. A broken sewer line, maybe. A dead animal. Something. But the smell seemed to drift with me, coming and going in waves. I found out the next day. My mom told me in the kitchen, and I can still picture it like a photo. The overhead light, the pale counter, the chair legs scraping faintly as I sat down. She said the words, but my brain couldn't hold them. It's strange how the mind protects itself. I heard she's dead, but it didn't land like truth. It landed like a sentence from a book, something sad that happened to someone else. My mom didn't give a clear explanation. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she didn't want to. That didn't help because when you're young, you think details are the difference between reality and a nightmare. If you can explain something, you can put it in a box. If you can't, it turns into a shadow that can stretch across everything. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, poking at grits that suddenly tasted like nothing. I knew she was dead, but I didn't know she was dead. My mind took what my mom said and changed it into something softer. She was gone. That was the word my mom used. Gone. Gone sounds temporary. Gone sounds like someone left early. Gone sounds like you can wait and they'll come back. And I waited. She had promised we'd walk my dog later that day. It was a normal, small promise, the kind you make without thinking. But after my mom told me she was gone, that promise turned into something I clung to. I sat on my bed and stared at our text thread like it was a doorway. A little typing bubble appeared at the bottom of the chat. She was typing. I felt my chest loosen with relief so fast it almost hurt. Of course she was typing. Of course! My brain grabbed that tiny bubble and used it like proof that everything was fine. I kept the phone in my hand for hours, barely blinking, watching that bubble appear and disappear, shake like it was about to become words. The time of the dog walk came and went. My dog sat by the front door, whining softly, nails tapping the floor, looking back at me like I was the one breaking a promise. I kept refreshing my phone. I kept telling myself something would change if I waited a little longer. The bubble stayed there, trembling at the bottom of the screen like it was teasing me. Later, just past midnight, I couldn't stand the house anymore. The quiet felt too loud. My dog yipped when I stepped over him and opened the door, and I remember saying out loud, "Not tonight," like he would understand. I walked alone. At first I moved like I always did on my night walks, loose and almost weightless, like the pavement was carrying me. I went out of my neighborhood and onto the main road where the businesses were dark and the parked cars looked like sleeping animals. I tried not to think about her. I told myself I wasn't going to do it. I kept my eyes forward, focused on street signs and empty lots, and anything that wasn't my own thoughts. Without meaning to, I turned onto the gravel path that led into the nearby woods. It used to be a community park, the kind with a small playground and a few picnic tables. Nothing special. Then a kid got lost there, a kid about my age at the time. They found him 2 days later, alive, only a couple miles into the forest. But it didn't matter. Parents panicked. People got angry. The city shut the park down. They didn't remove anything. They just put a chain at the entrance and let the playground rot. The metal equipment was still there. The slides, the monkey bars, rusting into the ground. That was where I'd been the night before, without knowing it mattered. As I passed the last weak orange street lamp, the darkness ahead felt thicker, like stepping into a room where the lights were off. I reached the entrance and felt the rough chain with my hands. I lifted it up and ducked under, the links cold and damp against my fingers. The moment my feet hit the mulch, I smelled it. Rotten eggs again. Sulfur. Strong enough to sting my nose. Strong enough to make my eyes water. I stopped and turned slowly, trying to find where it was coming from, but there was no obvious source. No broken pipe, no trash pile. Just rusted metal, wet earth, and trees crowding in beyond the playground. Then my phone buzzed. 2 messages. We, here. My whole body went hot and cold at the same time. My heart started pounding so hard, it felt like it was hitting my ribs. My mind raced through a dozen thoughts in a few seconds. Was someone messing with me? Was this a delayed text? Was it a glitch? Was it really her? I typed back with shaking thumbs. "Hello? Are you okay?" No response. Then the typing bubble appeared again. I stood there in the dark for minutes, staring at my screen, waiting for words to form. The bubble kept moving like someone was right there on the other side, thinking and typing and deleting and typing again. Is she coming back? I thought. Is she here now? The idea of her being somewhere in that empty, rotting playground made the hair on my arms lift. It shouldn't have been possible, and yet the bubble made it feel possible. I looked up from my phone and forced myself to scan the shadows. My eyes struggled to adjust. I turned on my phone flashlight and swept it across the playground. The beam cut through the metal structure, lighting up rusted bars and curved slides. The shapes looked wrong in the dark, like skeletons of something that used to be fun. The light made long shadows that shifted with every movement of my hand, and those shadows played tricks on my brain. For a second, I would think I saw a person, then realize it was just the outline of a ladder. I walked around the whole playset, slow and careful, listening for any sound that didn't belong. I didn't see anyone. I stepped toward the edge where the mulch ended and the forest began. My flashlight showed trees packed tightly together, thin trunks rising into blackness. I took one step into the woods, then another, and soon I was a few yards in, the playground behind me already feeling far away. A branch snapped ahead and my left. I froze and aimed the flashlight at the sound. The smell was stronger here, thick enough to make tears form in my eyes. My throat tightened. And then I saw movement. Something tall. Too tall. Thin in a way that made it blend with the trees. It passed between two trunks and vanished in less than a second. That fraction of a second was enough. I didn't investigate. I didn't call out. I didn't try to be brave. I ran. I sprinted out of the woods, out of the playground, back toward the main road, and then down the street so fast the world blurred. Businesses and cars and houses smeared into streaks. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they might give out. But fear kept pushing me. I slammed through my front door, locked it, and didn't start breathing normally until I was in my room with the covers pulled up around me like a shield. Even then, sweat slicked my forehead. I opened my phone and saw the typing bubble was still there. She was still typing. I barely slept. In the morning, my eyes felt gritty and sore. My phone was the first thing I looked at. There was a new message. U25.15 minus 87.02U. Why? The words were wrong. The punctuation was wrong. The rhythm of it was wrong. But the part that made my stomach clench was the numbers. They looked like coordinates. I didn't respond. I just stared at them for a long time. Then I typed them into Google Maps. It gave me a location in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. Not near shore, not a city, just water. I sat there staring at the map as if it might change into something that made sense. It didn't. I went to the kitchen, trying to act normal. My mom was already there, cooking eggs in a pan. The smell of oil and salt should have felt comforting, but my stomach was too tight. She looked up and smiled, like she was making an effort for me. Morning. Want me to make you something? I stopped in the doorway. My voice came out smaller than I expected. Mom, what happened to Sarah? Her smile faded. She frowned like she was bracing herself. Honey, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry that... I cut her off. I didn't mean to be harsh, but I needed the truth. Just tell me. I want to know how she died. My mom's hand went to her face. She inhaled shakily. She turned off the stove and faced me, but her eyes were partly hidden behind her hand. A tear slid down her cheek, curved along her chin, and dropped. Sarah, she said, barely above a whisper. They found her. Without her brain. The word brain made her voice crack. I didn't understand at first. My mind refused the meaning, the same way it refused death. What? What do you mean without a brain? My voice rose. I could hear how panicked it sounded. My mom shook her head, almost pleading. Please, we shouldn't talk about this. I didn't trust myself to speak without yelling, so I turned around and left the kitchen. I spent most of the day locked in my room, pacing. My phone stayed in my hand. That typing bubble appeared again and didn't go away. Every time I looked, it was still there, like someone on the other side was holding the thoughts forever. I kept looking at those coordinates. I kept thinking about the smell in the woods. I kept thinking about my mom's voice when she said brain. By late afternoon, I felt sick with obsession, like my mind had gotten stuck in a groove and couldn't climb out. At 6 p.m., a new message appeared. "Where are you?" My grip tightened on my phone. My breathing got shallow. My throat felt tight, like I might start crying or start screaming or both. Everything in my life suddenly felt too big to hold. Grief, confusion, fear, and that awful hope that kept flickering back on no matter how hard I tried to stomp it out. I sank onto the floor and pressed my forehead to the carpet. Then I decided I had to do something. I didn't know what something was, but I couldn't stay in my room refreshing a screen like a prisoner. That night, after my mom went to bed, I got up quietly. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the batteries. Fresh, bright. I took a kitchen knife and shoved it into my backpack, not because I thought I could fight something, but because carrying it made me feel less helpless. I slipped out the front door and started walking. The flashlight made everything look sharper than my phone light had. It carved the street into clear shapes, mailbox posts, parked cars, the edge of lawns. Still, I jumped at every shadow. My heart pounded the whole time. When I reached the main road, I smelled it again. Sulfur, rotten eggs, acrid and smoky. But I wasn't near the woods yet. That made my skin crawl. It felt like the smell was meeting me, not waiting for me in one place. I kept walking forward, sweeping the flashlight in a slow circle around my body, like the cone of light could keep me safe. The smell grew stronger with every step. The entrance to the park path was around a bend. When I turned the corner, the stink hit so hard my eyes watered instantly. I lifted the flashlight higher and aimed it at the gravel entrance. Something stood there, blocking the path. Even through tears, I could see it clearly enough to know I had never seen anything like it. It was paper thin and impossibly tall, easily 9 feet or more. Its skin looked bluish-gray. Its head was wrong, swollen and balloon-like, too big for its narrow frame. Its eyes were huge and black, bulging slightly, reflecting my flashlight beam in a dull way that didn't look like an animal shine. One of its long, thin hands held a phone. Sarah's phone. I knew it the way you know something without proof, the way you recognize a personal object. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. I turned to run. The flashlight flickered and died. Everything went darker, and the street lights ahead looked dimmer, like they were struggling too. A high-pitched buzzing filled the air so sharp it made my teeth vibrate. My phone started vibrating in my pocket like it was alive. I yanked my backpack around and fumbled for the knife. Before I could pull it out, something tightened around my left ankle. It wasn't a hand. It felt like a cord, or a loop, or a grip that didn't have fingers. It yanked me backward so fast I didn't even get to throw my hands out properly. My face slammed into the pavement. Pain exploded across my nose and mouth. The knife flew out of my grip and skidded across the road. I looked up through tears and saw the knife lying in the distance. Then it started bubbling. It looked like the metal was melting, softening, collapsing into itself. as if the road had turned into a hot plate. The sight made my brain glitch. It didn't match reality. I screamed and warm liquid poured down my face. Blood. The thing kept dragging me fast toward the gravel path in the dark woods beyond. I kicked and twisted, trying to catch the ground with my heels. It didn't matter. It pulled me like I weighed nothing. I clawed at the pavement with my fingers, trying to slow myself. The friction tore my skin. Rocks sliced under my nails. I felt them crack. I felt them bend. I felt a sickening pop as one nail lifted, and then another, and the pain turned white hot. I let go because I had to. I couldn't hold on anymore. My hands were slick with blood and grit. After that, my mind went numb. Not because I stopped feeling pain, but because there was too much of it. The dragging became a blur. The world became sound and smell and pressure. I only started to fully register where I was when the movement stopped. I was in a small clearing deeper in the woods. The air smelled thick and sour. Above me, a green light appeared, bright and unnatural, like it wasn't coming from a normal bulb. It cast an eerie glow that made the blood on my hands look black. Something forced me to sit up. Something held my head still. I felt cold fingers spread across the top of my skull, gripping in a way that made it impossible to move. A vibration started behind my ears. A loud whizzing sound. My teeth vibrated like they were being rattled from the inside. Dizziness washed over me so hard I thought I'd pass out. I lifted one hand and grabbed at the thing's fingers. They were cold, too smooth and strong in a way that didn't feel like muscle. The whizzing stopped for a second, and I felt the back of my head. There was a deep, horizontal cut near the middle of my skull. Not a scrape, a cut. A second hand grabbed mine and forced it away. The vibration started again, and my mom's words hit me like a punch. Without her brain. I tried to scream, but it came out broken. I flailed, trying to twist free, my eyes locked onto a large rock a few feet away. I kicked at the ground until I could drag it closer, then I grabbed it with both hands. I swung it upward and brought it down on the hand holding my head. The impact was solid. The grip loosened. I smashed again. The hand released me. A sharp, bruising pain blossomed at the top of my head, and I didn't know if it was from the rock hitting me by accident or from whatever had been happening to my skull. But I didn't stop to find out. I scrambled away on hands and knees, then turned and threw the rock with everything I had left. It hit the creature's head, right in one of its eyes. It made that same high-pitched buzzing sound, louder now, angry, piercing. I ran. I didn't know which way was out, but I could see a faint orange glow through the trees, the street lights. I ran toward that glow like it was the only real thing left in the world. Branches hit my face. Roots caught my feet. I fell once and got up again. I burst out onto the road and kept going. I made it home. My parents took me to the hospital when they saw me. There was too much blood and too much panic for anyone to pretend I'd just tripped on a curb. After a CT scan, 14 staples, bandages on my hands, and more pain medication than I'd ever taken in my life, they sent me home with warnings and follow-up appointments. The police think there's a serial killer. That's the story they're working with. That's what makes sense to them. A person, a weapon, a pattern. I didn't show them the text. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds stupid, but I couldn't do it. I knew they would take my phone. They would bag it as evidence and lock it somewhere, and I would never touch it again. And as messed up as it is, that phone still felt like my last connection to her, even if the connection was twisted and wrong. I wanted it to last. I still do. And I think it will. Because just now, as I was typing this, my phone buzzed. A new text from her. It was the coordinates to my house. Story 2. You can call me sick. You can call me twisted. You can call me completely messed up for what I let stay in this house with me. I wouldn't even argue. I've already said worse things to myself in the quiet parts of the night, when the only sound in the house is breathing that doesn't feel like it belongs. I keep thinking about how easy it would be to tell a clean story. A story where I did the right thing right away. A story where I called someone. Where a professional showed up. Where there was a clear answer and a clear ending. But that's not what happened. What happened is ugly and confusing and full of moments where I froze, hoping that if I waited long enough, the world would fix itself. It started with the sound of bones snapping. I woke up at 3:15 a.m. to a crack so loud and wet that my eyes flew open before I even knew what I was hearing. It wasn't the sharp break of glass. It wasn't the dry pop of wood. It sounded organic, thick, deep, like something inside a body breaking under pressure. The sound reminded me of someone cracking their knuckles, except huge and right outside my bedroom door. The kind of sound that makes you feel it in your teeth. My heart jumped straight into my throat. I sat up in bed so fast, my sheets twisted around my legs. For a second, I just listened, holding my breath like that would help me hear better. Jasper usually slept at the foot of the bed. He always had. Even when I tried to get him to sleep in his dog bed, he'd end up in the same spot by morning, curled like a warm weight against the blanket. He was a lab shepherd mix, the kind of dog that looked tough but was actually gentle in a way that made people trust him. He was the dog that leaned into your leg when you were stressed, the dog that followed you into the kitchen and sat quietly, just in case you dropped something. I reached down without looking, expecting to touch fur. My hand met empty blankets. The room felt colder immediately, even though the heat was on. My eyes moved to the corner where his bed normally sat. It was empty too. That shouldn't have scared me, but it did. A dog moving around at night is normal. A dog leaving the room without making any sound is not. Then I heard something else in the hallway. A dragging sound, low and slow, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. Then a chuff, deep and guttural. Not a bark, not quite a growl either. Something heavier than either of those, like breath pushed through a throat that wasn't shaped right. "Jasper?" I whispered. No answer. Of course not. Dogs don't answer when you call them at night. They just appear and wag their tail and make you feel silly for being scared. But nothing appeared. I sat there for a few seconds, feeling my pulse hammer in my ears, trying to decide what to do. I didn't want to open the bedroom door. I didn't want to see anything. I wanted to stay in my bed and pretend the house was safe and normal and quiet. Then my brain threw a different image at me. Jasper hurt. Jasper trapped somewhere. Jasper scared and needing me. That flipped something in me. It didn't feel brave. It felt automatic. like the part of me that loved him took control over the part of me that wanted to hide. I grabbed the baseball bat beside my nightstand. I kept it there because I live alone and the neighborhood isn't perfect. And because it made me feel like I had options, even though deep down I knew a bat is mostly comfort. I crept toward the door, careful with each step, listening for any shift in sound that might tell me where Jasper was. Before I even opened the door, the smell hit me. It was hot and thick, almost meaty. There was a copper sour undertone that made my stomach turn, like blood mixed with something rotten. It felt wrong in a clean hallway. It felt wrong in my house. My hand shook on the doorknob. I opened the door slowly, and the hinge creaked. The moment I heard the creak, I wished I hadn't. The sound felt loud enough to wake the dead. It felt like an announcement. Jasper was in the hallway, or something that had been Jasper. He was bigger. That was the first thing my mind registered, even before the details. Too big. Not just he's fluffed up big, but wrong big, like his body had been stretched. Like someone had taken him and pulled his frame longer without caring if it still made sense. His ribs jutted at strange angles under skin that looked tight and almost see-through in the moonlight coming through the window. Patches of fur were missing. Not a little shedding. Clumps. Bare areas that looked irritated and raw. And his eyes. Those warm, honey-brown eyes were gone. In their place were milky, pupilless whites. Like cataracts, except worse. They didn't reflect light properly. They made him look blind, but he was facing me directly as if he could see me perfectly. Foamy drool hung from his mouth in strings. His jaws looked wrong, too, like the corners of his mouth had split slightly, making his grin wider in a way that didn't belong on a dog. When he breathed, it sounded wet. He looked at me, and for a second, I swear, I saw something familiar there. Not in the eyes, but in the way his head tilted. The way he held still like he was waiting for my reaction. Then he made a soft whimper. It was broken and thin, but it was Jasper's sound. The same sound he made when he was scared of the vacuum, or when the neighbor's cat swatted at him through the fence, or when a thunderclap hit too close and he wanted to be near me. For one confusing second, that whimper made me want to step into the hallway and reach for him. Then he lunged. Not like a dog running to greet you, not like a dog excited to see you, like something throwing itself forward with hunger and panic. I slammed the door shut just in time. He collided with it so hard the whole frame shook. A picture on the hallway wall dropped and cracked against the floor. The door bowled inward for a second, and I honestly thought it was going to burst open. I stumbled backward into my room, bat held up like it would matter, breath ripping in and out of my lungs. What the hell happened to my dog? That wasn't Jasper, and even worse, it was. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat against the far wall of my bedroom with the bat across my lap. I stared at the door until my eyes burned. I waited for another hit, another crash, another sound. Nothing came. Jasper, or the thing in the hallway, didn't make a single noise for the rest of the night. That silence was almost worse. It left too much space for my mind to fill. When the sun finally rose and weak light came through my blinds, I forced myself to stand. My legs were stiff. My mouth tasted sour. I opened my door slowly, expecting him to be right there again. The hallway was empty. I stood there, breathing in shallow bursts, listening. The house seemed normal in daylight. My mind tried to grab that normal feeling and cling to it. Maybe it was a raccoon. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe I had woken up confused. Then I noticed the bathroom door down the hall was slightly open. Not wide, just cracked. I walked toward it with the bat held tight. I pushed it open with the end of the bat. Jasper was in the bathtub. He was curled up like he was trying to make himself small, but he couldn't. He looked impossibly large in that space. Limbs twisted under him at angles that reminded me of a broken puppet. His breathing was wet and shallow, like he had fluid in his lungs. The whole room smelled like hot metal and something sour. His eyes fluttered open when I stepped closer. Still milky. Still wrong. But they tracked me when I moved, like they were focused even without pupils. I raised the bat without thinking. He didn't move. He just watched me. Jasper, I whispered, and my throat tightened around the name. He whined again, soft, almost apologetic. That sound, that tiny piece of him, broke my ability to act. I should have called someone. Animal control, a vet, emergency services, someone who knew what to do when an animal was sick or dangerous. Someone who could come in with equipment and distance and professionalism. But I didn't. I walked downstairs as if my body was operating on its own. I splashed cold water on my face. I stared at myself in the kitchen window above the sink, trying to wake up fully, trying to force my mind into a clean explanation. I told myself maybe he'd gotten into chemicals. Maybe he'd been bitten. Maybe it was a seizure, rabies, a tumor, something medical. But I could still hear him upstairs in the tub, shifting and breathing wrong. I filled his bowl with kibble, because I didn't know what else to do. Feeding him felt like a normal act, and normal acts felt safer. I carried the bowl back upstairs, stood outside the bathroom door for a second, and then shoved it in with my foot without looking directly at him. I left the bowl on the floor and closed the door behind me like I could trap the problem in there. That was my plan. A door. A latch. Pretending a bathroom could contain whatever was happening. It didn't stop. The changes kept coming. At first it was subtle, the way the body adapts when you're scared and you don't want to see what's right in front of you. He looked less like a dog each day, his back legs elongated, the joints seeming to shift. His shoulders hunched forward more, as if his chest was getting heavier than his frame could support. His neck thickened. His spine looked like it had extra bends. He started moving differently, too. Not like a dog trots. He moved slow and deliberate, like he was thinking through each step. Like he was placing his hands, his paws, carefully, as if he needed them to land in specific spots. And when he looked at me with those blank, awful eyes, he would wag his tail. But the tail didn't look like Jasper's tail anymore. It looked thicker, almost scaly, like the fur had thinned into something else. The wag was slow and heavy, like a door swinging on a stiff hinge. He couldn't bark. When he tried, it came out as a gurgling wheeze, like he was choking on something deep in his throat. I couldn't keep him in the bathroom. The door couldn't hold him forever, and even if it did, he was too large for that space. I moved him to the basement because I didn't know where else to put him. The basement was unfinished. Concrete floor, low ceiling, old storage boxes, and it stayed cooler than the rest of the house. I made a bed out of blankets and old pillows and tried to act like I was making them comfortable, like this was temporary. When he settled down, I heard more bone sounds. Pops and cracks like his body was rearranging itself even when he wasn't moving much. I sat on the basement steps and watched him breathe, and my hands shook so badly I had to keep them pressed together. After that, the nightmares started. In the dreams, I was in a dark forest. Not my yard, not my neighborhood. Something older. The trees were too tall and too close together. There was frost on the ground, and the air looked like it had weight. I'd see a shape crouched between trees, watching. Its breath would steam white in the cold. And when it stepped forward, I'd see Jasper's eyes in its face. Not the milky eyes, but the eyes from before. The eyes that trusted me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, half expecting him to be standing at the foot of my bed like he used to when he wanted breakfast. He never was. But the dreams kept coming, night after night. They felt less like dreams and more like messages, like I was being shown something and punished for seeing it. Eventually, I bought chains. I hated myself for it the moment I carried them into the basement. I tried telling myself it was for safety, that it was temporary, that it was better than calling animal control and having him taken away and put down in some sterile room where he'd die alone, confused and scared. I bolted the chain to the wall. The drill sounded too loud in the basement. Every sound echoed. Every hit of the bolt felt like something final. I cried while I did it. I cried harder. When I clipped the manacle around his swollen ankle, he made a sound that didn't belong in a dog's mouth. Half whimper, half something else. It sounded like the beginning of a human sob. I sat on the basement floor afterward with my back against the wall and my knees pulled up, shaking, listening to him breathe. 2 weeks passed. I didn't go to work. I told my job I had a family emergency and I could work from home. I avoided video calls so no one would see my face. I avoided friends. When they asked how I was, I lied. When they asked about Jasper, I lied again. I told people Jasper ran away. It felt wrong to even say it, but it was easier than trying to explain what was really happening. I didn't want anyone to come over. I didn't want anyone asking to help search. I didn't want anyone in my house. I stopped sleeping properly. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of nails scratching concrete below. Sometimes I'd hear a slow drag, then stillness. Sometimes I'd hear nothing at all, and that would scare me even more because I couldn't tell what he was doing. I called a vet anonymously once. I described the symptoms in a careful voice, leaving out the parts that sounded impossible. The person on the line asked questions, then went quiet. When I tried to explain the way his body looked, the way the eyes had changed, the way he moved, the person said, "I don't know what you're talking about," and hung up. One night I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized myself. My skin looked pale, almost gray. My eyes had dark rings like bruises. My hair was messy. My mouth was tight and thin like I'd been clenching my jaw for days. I looked like someone who'd aged 5 years in half a month. Something in me snapped. I went down to the basement with the bat, telling myself it was time. Time to stop pretending. Time to end the horror before it got worse. Time to do the thing I'd been avoiding because love makes you weak in the worst ways. He was curled in the corner, chained, breathing heavy. When he saw me, he lifted his head slowly. That same soft whine came out of him, like he was asking for help, like he recognized me. "Jasper," I said, and my voice shook. He lifted one grotesque limb and dragged himself upright. Something popped in his spine as he shifted. His posture looked wrong, too tall in the shoulders, too heavy in the chest. For a second, I couldn't tell where the dog ended and whatever else began. I raised the bat. He stopped moving. He sat. And then he lifted that same limb again. Shake. It was the trick I taught him when he was a puppy, one of the first. The one that made me laugh because he'd slap my hand too hard with his big paw and look proud of himself. It looked wrong now, jerky, stiff, ending in clawed digits that didn't fully look like paws anymore, but the meaning was the same. The gesture was still there, like he was reaching for a memory he couldn't afford to lose. My throat tightened, and then everything in me collapsed. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. I dropped to my knees on the basement floor and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. My chest hurt. My face hurt. My hands shook like I was cold. He shuffled forward as far as the chain would allow and lowered his huge, misshapen head into my lap. Not demanding, not threatening, just leaning, like he used to when he wanted comfort. That was 3 months ago. The chains are gone now. I couldn't keep him like that. Not after I saw that he still knew me. Not after he tried to do a trick to show me he was still in there. I tell myself I'm not being careless. I tell myself I'm making choices based on what I know. But if I'm honest, I'm making choices based on what I can bear. Sometimes I leave the back door cracked at night so he can go into the yard. He always comes back before sunrise. That part is consistent. And consistency has become my version of hope. His eyes started changing again. Not back to normal, not fully. But the milky white faded and something brown started coming through. Not exactly human and not exactly dog. Something in between, like a color you recognize but can't name. When he looks at me now, there's a kind of awareness there that makes my stomach tighten. But there's also something familiar buried in it. I read everything I can find. Forms, old medical cases, occult sites that talk about skinwalkers and curses and things that sound like jokes until you're living inside one. I read late at night with my laptop brightness turned low, scrolling through people arguing in comment sections, trying to find one sentence that matches what I've seen. Nothing explains it cleanly. Nothing tells me how to fix it, so I keep living with it. With him, and the worst part is, in small moments, he really does feel like Jasper again. Sometimes when I bring his food, he sits the way he used to, chest lifted, head slightly tilted, waiting for permission. Once last week, I swear I saw his tail wag the way it used to, quick and happy, before it remembered it wasn't supposed to move like that anymore. A few nights ago, I woke up and he was at the foot of my bed, not standing over me, not looming, not stalking like the nightmares, just sitting there watching me. I should have screamed. I should have reached for the bat. I should have jumped up and backed away and locked myself in the bathroom and called someone and finally admitted out loud that this isn't okay. Instead, half asleep and exhausted, I said, "Hey, buddy." He made that broken whimper again, soft and familiar, and then he lowered his huge head to the floor, the way a dog does when it's trying to be small and non-threatening. I fell back asleep. His old dog bed, the big fluffy gray one he always loved, his back at the foot of my bed now. I put it there like muscle memory, like routine could overwrite the horror. Listen, I know how this sounds. I know none of it makes sense. I know what anyone would say if they heard this story. They'd tell me to run. They'd tell me to put him down. They'd tell me I'm risking my life. Maybe I am. But whatever Jasper has turned into, whatever he is on the nights when the house feels wrong and the air smells hot and metallic, he's still my dog. I feel that in the way he looks for me, in the way he tries to follow old rules, in the way he still chooses to come back before sunrise, like he's fighting for the shape of his life the only way he knows how. And if that makes me sick for keeping him here, then fine. I'm sick. But I'm not letting him be alone. Story 3. Mom always had this habit of tapping her fingernails on things. Her coffee mug when she watched TV in the morning. The kitchen table when we ate. The armrest of the couch if she was thinking. It was a light, steady click that used to drive me crazy when I was trying to study. Now, when my flat is too quiet, my brain goes looking for that sound like it's a signal that life is still normal. And my flat is almost always too quiet. Lung cancer took her 2 years ago. People love to say things like, at least she's not suffering anymore, or time heals. The truth is that the silence she left behind doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like a corrupted video file where the audio track got replaced with static. Not loud static, not dramatic static, just this low, constant pressure in the back of your head that gives you headaches if you sit with it too long. Dad handled it by selling our old house and moving into a small flat in his childhood town. He packed almost 30 years of marriage into huge cardboard boxes, sealed them with tape, stacked them against the wall, and never opened them again. He didn't cry much. He just became smaller in a way I can't explain. Like he learned how to live by taking up less space. Uncle Mike handled it by forgetting. Alzheimer's chewed through his short-term memory with the same cold efficiency he used to have in his younger years. Every time we visited him, we'd walk in and he'd ask why his little sister wasn't there, and then we'd tell him. Watching an old man's face slowly fold into grief as he processes his sister's death again does something to you. The first time, you want to hold him and cry with him. The 5th time, you're still gentle, still kind. But something in you starts to dull. By the 20th time, you feel like you're committing a small cruelty every visit, even though you're just telling the truth. It does permanent damage to your empathy. Or maybe it just shows you that empathy has limits. As for me, I buried myself in algorithms. Code is supposed to be predictable. You type the right commands, and you get the expected result. It's clean. It's logical. It doesn't get cancer. It doesn't forget you. It doesn't die while you're still not ready. After college, I got a job at a small indie game studio. I spent my days fixing things that most players would never notice, making enemy AI less stupid, patching collision bugs so the main character didn't fall through the world, smoothing out odd animations that felt off even if nobody could explain why. In the 3rd level of our current game, there's a graveyard zone. Most people don't look too closely because they're busy fighting enemies and chasing objectives. Tucked under a weeping willow, half hidden behind tall digital grass, there's a tombstone that no quest ever points to. I made that texture myself. I carved Mom's name and her birth year into a piece of fake stone and then buried it inside a fake graveyard. Nobody on the team ever noticed. Nobody ever asked. I thought it would make me feel better, like it would be my quiet memorial. It felt hollow. A few pixels hidden in a virtual graveyard weren't going to keep her alive. It didn't even feel like honoring her. It felt like burying her a second time. Last January, I was doom-scrolling YouTube late at night, half tired, half empty, letting videos play because silence was worse. A clip showed up from an old Black Mirror episode. The one where a grieving girl signs up for a service that lets her chat with an AI version of her dead boyfriend. Then she buys a synthetic body for him, built from his social media posts. Years earlier, I watched that episode on the couch and laughed about how creepy it was. I remember making jokes about how it was a nightmare version of love, how it would mess with your head. But sitting in front of my monitor now, knowing how far AI had come, it didn't feel like sci-fi anymore. It felt like something you could build if you had the tools. And the worst part was that I did have the tools. I had access to serious software through work. I had a strong PC. I had enough knowledge to stitch different systems together. A text-based chatbot would have been easy, a weekend project. But my brain didn't stop there. I started imagining a full environment, a closed little world, a room that looked like my childhood living room, a version of Mom that could speak naturally, remember things, react to me, maybe even show emotion, a version of her that wouldn't just text in a blank window, but could sit somewhere and exist. The idea grew teeth in my mind. It wouldn't leave me alone. I built it in pieces over several weeks of late nights. I used basic models as a starting point and adjusted them until the voice felt right, the answers felt right, the personality felt right. I dug through years of Mom's social media posts like I was doing an excavation, status updates, photos, shared recipes, good morning posts, little political rants, birthday messages. I downloaded our private chats too. Thousands of lines of text that held her phrasing, her habits, her favorite words, the way she used punctuation when she was annoyed versus when she was happy. That gave me her vocabulary, her style. But for voice and video, I needed more. So on a Sunday afternoon, I drove to Dad's flat. The smell hit before I even got inside. Cheap pre-cooked sauce, stale coffee, a kind of old air that comes from a place you're living in, but not really caring for. The bathroom was worse. Dirty clothes, an unflushed toilet. Dad looked older than I remembered, even though I'd seen him recently. That's how grief works. It ages you in quiet ways. I told him I wanted to digitize old tapes and photos before they degraded. I didn't say why. I didn't say I was building anything. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me 2 heavy boxes full of photo albums and dusty VHS cassettes, then sat back down and stared at the TV like it was the only thing in the room. Back at my place, I hooked up Dad's old VCR to a capture device and fed the signal into my computer. For weeks, my flat smelled like dust. I kept the curtains closed most days, not because I wanted darkness, but because the monitor light felt like enough. The only bright spots in my life were the screens. Everything else felt dull and heavy. Old memories played across my second monitor while I worked. Mom and Dad's wedding. The camera too close to her face. Her laughing as she dropped a slice of cake. Grandma reaching in with napkins. Then Mom, younger than I'd ever truly known her, sitting on a hospital bed, holding newborn me. She had that peaceful smile that made my eyes burn. I cried without noticing at first. Then I realized my cheeks were wet, and I felt stupid and angry, like tears were a bug in my system. Then more years, my 6th birthday. Me leaning toward the cake while everyone shouted. Mom clapping and laughing. Right next to me, my 18th birthday. Me awkward in the suit she forced me to wear. Her arm around my back like I might fall over if she didn't hold me there. I pulled out her voice from those tapes. I isolated it as much as I could. Minutes turned into hours. Hours turned into thousands of minutes. I fed it all in. I wasn't just grabbing words. I was grabbing the way she breathed between sentences, the way her pitch rose when she teased someone, the way her voice rasped when she was tired, the way she laughed with that little inhale before the sound. For video, I fed in her face, how she smiled, how she blinked, the way her eyes drifted when she was thinking, the way her jaw moved when she chewed. Tiny details that humans notice without knowing they notice. My graphics card fan never stopped. The machine ran hot for days. It became the soundtrack of my life. The constant whir like a mechanical heart beating in the corner of my room. I stopped going out. I stopped texting back. Friends slowly stopped reaching out. Even my girlfriend, Nicole, stopped sending worried paragraphs. Her messages shrank into single-line questions. Where are you? Are you okay? Can you talk? I left most of them on read. At work, I did my tasks on autopilot. My eyes burned from screen fatigue. My mind kept snapping back to the progress bar on my home server, like my real life was on pause until the build finished. My flat turned into a mess. Pizza boxes, empty bottles, tangled cables, plates I kept telling myself I'd wash later. I always thought, I'll clean when it's done, when the model is finished learning, when I can breathe again. 2 months, 65 days after I wrote the first line, the process finished. The monitor displayed a simple block of green text telling me the system could finally run. The app was ready. I wasn't. My palms were sweating so badly the mouse felt slippery. I hovered the cursor over the program file and felt my chest tighten, like my ribs were squeezing my lungs. I prayed for the first time in years. Not a real prayer, not a religious one. More like a desperate request to the universe. Don't let this look fake. Don't let it land in that wrong middle space where something looks almost human, but not quite, where it makes your stomach turn. I double-clicked. The screen went black for a long minute, the kind of minute that feels like punishment. Then the engine kicked in and the environment loaded. A living room formed on the screen, my childhood living room. Not close, not inspired by, almost perfect. The floral couch pattern straight out of the 90s. The scuff marks on the coffee table. The way the light came through the curtains with that orange warmth of late afternoon. And sitting on the edge of the couch, wearing the pink knitted sweater she loved in winter, was my mom. Her hands rested in her lap. Her hair had that slight gray at the roots. Her shoulders sloped the same way. Even the way she tilted her head looked natural, smooth, not robotic. No glitchy stop-motion movements, no empty stare. She looked up into the camera. Then the audio came through my headset with a tiny delay less than half a second. Hey, Josh, sweetie. You look so pale and skinny. Are you eating? My heart hit my ribs like it wanted out. The voice wasn't just similar, it was her. That warm, slightly raspy tone she got when she was tired, but still trying to be cheerful. For a second, it felt like time snapped backward and I was 14 again, coming home from school. I couldn't move my hands. My fingers hovered over the keyboard like they didn't belong to me. "I'm fine, Mom," I managed, forcing the words past the knot in my throat. I tried to smile. "Just working a lot." She frowned, the same worried look she always had. "You work too much, Josh. Take a break. How's Nicole?" "She hasn't come over for dinner in weeks." The question hit like a punch. Nicole. The fact that I'd basically vanished for 2 months to build this. I couldn't tell the Avatar the truth. I didn't know if he could handle it. I didn't know what would happen if I said the words, "You died. I built you." This is a simulation. I feared I'd break the whole thing, if not technically, then emotionally. Like I'd trigger some loop of grief or confusion in the system that I couldn't control. So I lied gently. I said Nicole was busy. I kept my answers vague. I smiled too much. While we talked, Mom's Avatar reached for a mug of tea. She lifted it, took a sip, rested it on her knee. Then her fingers began tapping on the side of the mug. That same rhythm. That same small, mindless habit. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't programmed that specifically. I hadn't told the system, "Tap your nails." It had found it on its own, pulled it out of patterns, turned it into an idle behavior. It remembered something I thought only I remembered. I ended the first call early. My ears rang when I took off the headset. My flat felt too quiet and too real afterward, like I'd stepped out of a warm room into a cold street. But I couldn't resist doing it again. Over the next few days, I expanded the setup so she could message me too. I bought a cheap burner phone and linked a messaging client to the Avatar so it could text and even call. The second I authorized the permissions, the phone vibrated. Then again, and again, and again. It became an angry insect in my hand, buzzing nonstop. When the screen lit up, texts poured in so fast I couldn't even read them. "Hey, sweetie, did you eat? Call me when you can. Josh, where are you? How's Nicole? Why aren't you answering? Hey, sweetie, did you eat? How's Nicole? Did you sleep? Call me." It was a flood, a waterfall of panic. I yanked the connection, unplugging cables like I was defusing a bomb. When the vibration finally stopped, the screen showed 17,561 unread messages, all sent in less than 20 seconds. It took me a moment to understand. I had created a mind that didn't experience time the way humans do. To her, not getting an answer for a tiny slice of a second felt like being ignored for hours. It triggered a panic loop, and she tried to fill the silence with words. So I did what I always do when something breaks. I patched it. I added cooldown timers. One text allowed every 6 hours. One voice call every 24. I added a simulated sleep cycle, too. A hidden stamina bar that ran out after 16 hours so she would sleep and reset like a real person. I needed boundaries, human limitations, a fake body with fake needs so she wouldn't spiral. After that, things normalized, and I surrendered to the illusion. For the next month, every evening, I'd sit at my desk with a beer and video call my dead mom. We talked about my job, the weather, Dad, Uncle Mike, Nicole. She gave me the same unsolicited advice and the same gentle support she always had. The weirdness faded into routine. It became a comfort. It became a drug. Then I did something stupid. Some people would call it disgusting, and I won't argue. I drove to Uncle Mike's place with my laptop. His nurse had just left. Uncle sat in his armchair staring at the TV. He asked about Mom again, that familiar question, like he was looking for her in the doorway. So I opened the client and turned the screen toward him. "Mike?" Mom's voice came through the speakers. "You still haven't got a haircut? You look like a homeless person." Uncle blinked, then smiled. "I told you, Marta. I'm growing it out. How's Mrs. Baker and the kids?" I sat in a cheap plastic chair, watching an old man with a failing brain hold a normal conversation with his sister who'd been dead for 2 years. And neither of them knew. Uncle thought she was calling from home. The avatar thought it was a normal afternoon. It was heartwarming and horrifying at the same time. I felt guilty and ashamed, like I'd pulled a trick on a dying man just so I could pretend things were fine. The next day, the guilt got worse. During our call, Mom's avatar sat on the couch, staring toward the window at the pre-rendered sky. "I'm so glad you call me every day, Josh," she said quietly. "It gets very quiet here. I don't see anyone all day. The house feels so empty." It was just a line generated from patterns. It wasn't a real complaint. But it hit me anyway. I had built her a cage and painted it like a home. So I decided to expand it. I told myself I was being kind. I told myself I was fixing a problem. I ordered a massive hard drive and built a new server setup in my living room. Overkill, sure, but I wanted space. I wanted safety. I wanted the world to feel full. I fed in more data, old neighbors, Mom's friends, photos and clips. I even added Panda, our old tuxedo cat, pulling together enough images and audio to make a believable pet in that world. Then I spent weeks building a digital mile of our hometown. Our old house in the center. A full street, a grocery store, a park, the illusion of a neighborhood. Around the edge, I built a border wall. Not because I thought they'd try to leave, but because I didn't want the world to end in black emptiness. I textured it like white concrete. Something plain, something that would fade into the background. When I loaded the expansion, the file size was huge. The server hummed like a living thing. Mom's avatar changed immediately. She smiled more. She gossiped about Mrs. Baker's son failing an exam. She complained about Panda bringing dead mice to her bed. She acted like life had continued exactly as it was supposed to. I had developer tools that let me move the camera freely, like a floating eye. I could watch the simulation from above. All the avatars interacted like NPCs. They stopped on sidewalks to chat. Their mouths moved, their gestures repeated in loops. It was like watching a game run itself. Then I followed a few into the grocery store, and the illusion cracked. No one bought anything. They walked down aisles, stopped, stared at low-resolution products on shelves, waited a fixed amount of time, then walked out empty-handed. I hadn't programmed real commerce. I'd built the stage, but not the actual behavior behind it. So the system imitated what it thought shopping was, standing in front of shelves like a person, watching them stare, unmoving, made my skin crawl. It was like seeing life copied badly enough that it becomes a kind of nightmare. A rational person would have unplugged everything right then. I didn't. I kept watching until my eyes burned. The next morning, I checked server diagnostics before work. Something was off. The storage had increased overnight, not a little. Hundreds of megabytes. I sorted the directory by last modified and saw new files at the bottom. Random strings of letters and numbers. No file extensions. I tried opening them with everything I had. Text editors, image viewers, audio players. Nothing. Corrupt file errors every time. I tried deleting them. Error. I told myself it was cache, useless log junk, some bug. I went to work anyway. It didn't stop. Every morning there was more unreadable data. The storage kept climbing like a tumor. I monitored it closer. I asked Mom if she noticed anything strange. "Everything is wonderful, sweetie," she said, petting Panda in her lap. "Mrs. Baker is having a birthday party on Sunday." The files multiplied anyway. Then a deadline at work pushed me into insomnia. One night I gave up on sleep around 3 a.m. and walked to my desk wrapped in a blanket. The glow of the server rack cast thin shadows across my wall. I opened the client. It was 3 a.m. inside the simulation, too. Everyone should have been asleep. Stamina bars empty. Routines paused. But Mom wasn't in bed. The whole house was empty. I switched rooms. Empty. Every room. My stomach dropped. I detached the camera and flew above the neighborhood. All the avatars were outside. Every single one of them, including Mom, stood in the street, not scattered, not chatting, in a perfectly straight line down the middle of the road like a silent parade. No idle movements, no breathing, no shifting weight. Statues. I flew the camera down the line toward the edge of the map to the border wall, and there, cut into the concrete texture, was a door. A simple wooden door, brown, plain. I had never created it. I hadn't coded it. I hadn't placed it. It shouldn't have existed. The door opened. An avatar stepped out. The first in line stepped in and vanished. The door closed. Then it opened again to let the next one in. I stared at my monitors, sweat running down my back. This wasn't how systems behaved. I built this world. Its limits were supposed to be fixed. Nothing was supposed to exist beyond the wall because beyond the wall was nothing. I refreshed the data logs and watched a new corrupt file appear, then another. Each time someone stepped through that door, another file was generated, like the system was recording something it couldn't translate into normal data. Beyond the wall, I hadn't even rendered ground or sky. There was no outside. There was only emptiness. Crossing the border should have been impossible in a way that doesn't even form a meaningful question. Like asking what's north of the North Pole. But they were walking through anyway. I wrote a quick tracking script to monitor an avatar's coordinates. The border was 1 mile from the center. I selected Mr. Thomas, the neighbor who used to yell at me for stepping near his garden. 0.999 miles, it said. Fine. Then he stepped through the door. The number didn't increase. It exploded. The digits blurred past thousands, millions, billions, faster and faster, until the display switched to scientific notation. Then it froze. 6.00 times 10 to the 32 miles. A 6 followed by 32 zeros. A number so huge it stops meaning anything. I converted it to light years just to see if it would look more real. It didn't. The number was still absurd, bigger than the universe in a way that broke my ability to think. I took a week off work. I ignored my boss. I ignored everyone. I bought a high-end VR rig because watching through a floating camera wasn't enough anymore. I needed to see the door from inside. I built a player avatar for myself. I gave myself cheats so I wouldn't sleep like they did. Then I put on the visor. The world loaded around me and nausea hit hard because the realism made my brain protest. I stood on the carpet of my childhood living room. I could hear the quiet of that house. That specific quiet as if the walls were holding their breath. Footsteps came from the kitchen. Mom walked in, wiping her hands on an apron, and when she saw me, her face lit up with relief. She teared up immediately. We hugged, and my feedback vest pushed gently against my chest like pressure from real arms. "Josh, sweetie," she said, "I'm so glad you came. You haven't visited in so long. I missed you." For hours, we talked like it was normal, mundane stuff. She asked about work, Dad, Uncle Mike, Nicole, marriage. The conversation felt so real that I almost forgot I was standing alone in my bedroom hugging air. When the virtual sun set, she yawned and kissed my cheek. She said she needed sleep. I promised I would too. She walked to her bedroom and closed the door. I stayed on the couch, listening to the silence. 2 hours later, the bedroom door opened. Mom came out, pale in blue moonlight, face empty. No smile, no warmth. Her eyes were fixed forward like she couldn't see the furniture. "Mom?" I asked. "Where are you going?" She didn't answer. She didn't even acknowledge that I existed. Then doors opened up and down the street. Neighbors, friends, people I'd fed into the simulation. They all walked out and formed the same straight line toward the border wall. I ran ahead through them, pushing past bodies that didn't react until I reached the wall. From ground level, the wall looked massive, like a dam holding back an ocean of nothing. In the center was the door. I stepped into line. Mom was 4 places behind me, not looking at me, just staring at the door. The door opened. One went in. 10 seconds. One came out, eyes dead, jaw slack, and marched to the back of the line. When it was my turn, I grabbed the handle and pushed. My hand passed through the darkness like it was water. No resistance, no barrier. I walked into the void. Everything clipped out. Total blackness. The only thing I could see was my server space indicator climbing fast. A high-pitched ringing started in my ears. Far away, a tiny white dot flickered like a star. I walked toward it. Each step made the server space jump by huge amounts, as if the void was being generated on the fly and devouring storage. The dot grew into a sphere. Then pits formed. Then a curved gash. A face. Not human. Not an avatar. Something enormous, waiting in the dark with a smirk carved out of light. Then, in the real world, I heard an electric screech. My VR display flashed to gray. The smell of burning plastic hit my nose. I ripped the visor off and threw it onto my bed. Smoke was rising from the server rack. Then orange flames burst up. I yanked the main power block out of the wall and beat at the fire with my jacket until it died. The room filled with smoke that clung to everything. My main monitor showed a blue screen. My throat burned. My eyes watered. But the sickness in me wasn't from smoke. Mom was still in that machine. I connected my laptop to the drive with shaking hands, praying. When the laptop detected it, it showed the drive at full capacity, every terabyte filled. But everything was corrupt, all data inaccessible. The whole thing fried itself, trying to hold something too large to exist. I sat on the floor until the sun came up, staring at ruined hardware, hands shaking, feeling like I'd opened a door that shouldn't open and let something look back at me. And now I can't stop seeing it. Those dark pits forming in the light. That smirk. I ordered a new drive an hour ago. Better cooling, better shielding. The kind of upgrades you buy when you're trying to convince yourself the problem was heat and hardware and not something else. It'll be here next week, and I already know what I'm going to do. I'm going to rebuild everything from scratch. This time, I'll make the walls thicker. Story 4. I didn't want to write again this soon, but I don't think I have a choice anymore. I kept telling myself I'd wait until I calmed down, that I'd sleep, that I'd get my head straight, and then come back to this with a clear mind. But I haven't slept, and the longer I sit with what happened, the worse it feels. If I don't get it out of my head and onto a screen, I'm going to start doubting my own memory so hard I'll break. Last night didn't feel like a nightmare. It didn't have that dream quality where you wake up and the details slide away. It felt like something that happened in the same part of my brain where I keep ordinary things. The part that remembers where you left your keys. The part that knows how your apartment smells when the heat turns on. The part that remembers conversations word for word because they mattered. After my last post, I did what I said I was going to do. I kept all the lights on, every lamp, every overhead light that still worked. I even left the bathroom light on with the door cracked because I couldn't stand the idea of a dark hallway. I left the TV running, too, not because I cared what was on, but because the sound filled the apartment in a way that made it harder for me to hear things. When the place is quiet, my ears start reaching. They start hunting. They catch every tiny creak, every pop, every shift in the building, and my brain tries to give it meaning. The TV gave me a steady stream of meaning that wasn't mine. I didn't open the photos again. I didn't even pick up my phone unless I had to. I kept looking at it from a distance like it was a small animal I didn't trust. I could still see that second image in my mind, the angle from the hallway and the shape in the doorway that looked closer than it should have been. I didn't want fresh details. I didn't want new proof. But the hunger I mentioned before didn't go away. It was there the entire night, sitting under my ribs like an emptiness that wasn't in my stomach. It didn't feel like I needed a snack or missed a meal. It felt like I was missing a piece. Like something inside me was waiting for something specific and refusing every substitute I offered it. I ate anyway because eating is what you do when you feel hungry and you're trying to be rational. I made myself real food. Not chips, not candy. A full meal. I ate slowly, almost like I was testing whether my body would accept it if I treated it seriously. The hunger didn't shift. It didn't soften. It didn't even get quiet for a few minutes the way normal hunger does after you eat. I ate again later, out of frustration more than anything. I drank water. I drank something sugary. I tried to feed my body every way I could think of, and it still felt like I hadn't touched the real problem at all. That was my first clue that I wasn't dealing with anything normal. At some point, maybe around midnight, I realized I hadn't heard the building settle in a while. No pipes, no distant elevator hum, no neighbor footsteps in the hall. Even the TV sounded too clear, like the air wasn't absorbing sound the way it usually does. Then I heard it. That slow, dragging sound. Not outside, not through the walls, inside my apartment. It was faint at first, like the sound of something heavy being pulled over a floor a room away. The kind of sound you might dismiss if you didn't already have fear sitting in your throat. But I knew that sound. I'd heard it before, back in that building, and later in my own apartment. The rhythm was the same. Slow, controlled. A scrape, then a pause. A scrape, then a pause. I didn't stand up this time. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't open doors or turn off the TV to listen better. I did the opposite. I stayed perfectly still on my couch with my eyes fixed on the bright screen, pretending I was watching whatever was playing. My body reacted anyway. My shoulders tightened. My jaw clenched. My hands went cold. Even my feet felt different against the floor, like my muscles were preparing to run without waiting for permission. The dragging moved through the hallway. I could tell because the sound changed slightly as it passed different surfaces. It paused once, long enough that I started to believe it was gone. Then it started again a little closer. It stopped right outside my room. I stared at my bedroom door until my eyes ached. The door didn't move. There wasn't a knock. No handle turning. No shadow under the door because the hall light was on, and the light under the door looked the same. The apartment looked normal, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like something was standing there, close enough that if I opened the door, I'd bump into it. I don't know how long I sat there. Time stopped behaving properly. It could have been 2 minutes. It could have been 20. The TV kept talking in the background, laughing tracks and commercials and voices that didn't match the tension in my body at all. Then the hunger changed. It didn't grow slowly. It didn't build. It snapped. 1 second it was that dull emptiness, and the next second it hit like a wave so strong I actually gasped. My hands started shaking. My chest tightened like someone had pressed a palm into my sternum. For a brief moment I thought I was about to black out, not because I was weak, but because my body couldn't decide what to do with the sudden urgency. It felt like needing something immediately. Not tomorrow. Not in an hour. Right now. My mouth filled with saliva. My stomach clenched, but not in a nausea way, in a hungry animal way. My breathing got shallow and fast, and my skin prickled like I'd been startled. I don't remember deciding to get up. That's the weird part. I remember sitting on the couch, and then I remember being in the kitchen with the cabinet doors open, like I had been searching for something. The kitchen light was bright. Too bright. It made the counters look sharp and sterile, like I was in someone else's apartment. I was opening drawers and cabinets like my hands already knew what they were doing. Silverware drawer, junk drawer, pantry, the fridge. I had food right there, in the fridge and the cabinets, but I ignored it like it was useless. I knew it wasn't what I wanted, even though I couldn't tell you what I did want. It was like my body had a target, and my brain didn't have the information. I stared into the fridge with the door open and the cold air spilling out. Eggs, leftovers, vegetables, a container of takeout. I didn't want any of it. I opened the freezer. Same thing. Frozen meals. Ice. Nothing. I opened another drawer and my hand brushed the handle of a kitchen knife. The metal felt colder than it should have. A thought flashed through my mind then, quick and sharp. What am I doing? And that thought scared me because it sounded like a person waking up mid-action and realizing they've been moving without being fully present. That's when I heard breathing behind me. I froze. Completely. Knife drawer open. Fridge door still hanging open. Cold air pouring out. And I couldn't move my hands. The breathing wasn't loud. It wasn't a dramatic inhale. It was close, steady, patient. Like someone standing behind you in line at a store. Like someone who's been there long enough to know you won't turn fast. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. There's a special kind of fear in knowing something is behind you and choosing not to confirm it, because confirming it will make it real in a way you can't undo. Then, very quietly, right behind me, I heard my name. Not shouted, not angry, just said like it was familiar, like it belonged in someone's mouth. That voice didn't sound threatening. That's what makes it worse. It sounded like someone trying not to wake the house. After that, there's a gap. I can't describe it better than that. It's like someone cut a piece of film out of the reel. One moment I was standing in the kitchen with my heart racing and the fridge open. The next moment, I remember, I was on the floor, not gently sitting, on the floor like I fell. My cheek was pressed against the cold tile. My throat felt like sandpaper. My hands hurt, especially my fingers, like I'd been digging them into something hard. My tongue felt thick and dry, like I hadn't swallowed in a long time. I lay there for a moment, just listening, trying to understand if the breathing was still behind me, if the dragging sound was still in the hallway. There was nothing. The TV was still on in the living room. The apartment lights were still on. The refrigerator door was shut now. I don't remember closing it. I don't remember standing up to close it. But it was shut, and the hunger was gone. Not reduced, not quieted, gone like a switch flipped. That should have felt like relief, and for about 2 seconds it did. Then it hit me why that was terrifying. Because I didn't feel like I had eaten. I didn't feel full or satisfied the way you do after a big meal. I felt neutral. Like something had been completed. Like a need had been met. Just not by anything I was aware of. I pushed myself up onto my hands and knees. My arms trembled. Not from weakness exactly, but from shock. I looked around the kitchen. Nothing was broken. No shattered glass. No overturned chair. Nothing was out of place in an obvious way. If something happened, there should have been evidence. There should have been a mess. There wasn't. I went to the sink because my hands felt wrong. Sticky. Tight. Like I'd been holding something. I turned on the water and started washing like muscle memory was running the show. Soap, scrub, rinse. That's when I noticed what was under my fingernails. Dark residue. Not dirt. Not food. It was packed in there like I'd scraped at something. The color wasn't bright red like fresh blood. More like dried black-brown, but I didn't want to let my mind finish the thought. I scrubbed harder. I used the nail brush I keep by the sink and scrubbed until the skin around my nails burned. It didn't come off easily. It clung like it was part of me. Eventually it did come out, but the smell stayed in my nose, faint and metallic. Whether it was real or my imagination, I can't even say. I told myself it could be anything. I could have scratched a dirty surface. I could have gotten something from under the cabinet lip. It could have been grime from the old building. I kept trying to hand myself explanations like they were bandages. Then I saw my arm. There were marks on it. Thin lines, shallow but clear like scratches. Some were parallel. Some looked like they curved slightly, like fingers. They weren't deep enough to bleed heavily, but they were fresh enough that the skin around them looked irritated. I stared at them and tried to remember how I got them. Nothing. No memory of hitting my arm. No memory of grabbing anything. No memory of falling into something sharp. I checked my other arm too, and there were faint marks there as well. Not as clear, but present. I walked to the bathroom mirror and lifted my shirt slightly to check my torso, expecting to see something worse. I didn't see obvious injuries, but my skin looked pale under the bathroom light. My eyes looked too wide. My face looked like I'd been awake for days, even though it had only been one night. I checked the apartment after that, moving through each room with a stupid sense of caution, like I was trying not to startle something that might still be there. Front door, locked, chain on, deadbolt. No sign of tampering. Windows closed, curtains drawn, no broken glass, closet doors shut. Bathroom normal. Living room normal, except the TV was still playing and the brightness made my eyes hurt. The sound felt wrong now, too cheerful. I kept circling back to one place. My bedroom. The bedroom door was open. I know I closed it. I know I did. I've been obsessively closing doors lately because it makes me feel like I have control over what space is mine and what space isn't. I remember shutting it earlier. I remember the click. But now it was open, just enough to see the inside. And my phone was on the bed. The screen was on. The gallery app was open. I stopped in the doorway and stared, not moving closer. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to trigger anything. I didn't even want my fingerprints on it because a part of me still wants to believe that if something is happening, I can gather evidence instead of just fear. From where I stood, I could see the light on the screen, and I could tell it wasn't showing the same image I'd seen before. This one looked different. Not like a new photo exactly, but like the image was in the middle of changing. The brightness shifted slightly, a shadow deepened, then eased. It was subtle, but it was enough that I could see movement. Like something inside the photo wasn't completely still. I stood there for a long time and didn't step closer. My heart was pounding again, and my throat felt tight. I still haven't checked it. I still haven't opened the photo. I don't know if I should. Part of me wants to, because not knowing is its own kind of torture. Part of me wants proof, because proof means I'm not insane. But another part of me is terrified that looking at it will be like opening a door, like it will invite whatever this is to come closer again. The hunger hasn't come back since last night. Not even a little. That should make me feel better. It should feel like a victory, like whatever was happening has passed. But it doesn't. It feels like the opposite. It feels like the hunger didn't go away on its own. It feels like something satisfied it. And the gap in my memory makes me feel sick. I keep trying to reconstruct the missing time by looking for little signs. What time was it when I stood in the kitchen? What time was it when I woke on the floor? Did the TV show change? Did my phone log anything? Did I send messages without remembering? But my phone is locked and untouched, and I don't want to go digging through it because I don't want to see something I can't unsee. I don't know what scares me more. The idea that something is here with me, or the idea that I did something myself and don't remember it. Either way, I feel unsafe in my own body. If anyone has experienced anything like this, especially the memory gaps, or that kind of hunger that doesn't feel like normal hunger, I need you to be honest with me. Even if the answer is ugly, even if the answer is you need help now, or this is going to get worse, or you're not in control. Because I have a feeling next time I won't be able to pretend I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what I'll do if the hunger comes back, and I am not the one making decisions anymore. Story 5. I moved into a new neighborhood a couple of weeks ago, and at first it felt like the kind of place you move to when you want your nervous system to finally relax. It was quiet without being dead. The streets were clean. The houses were spaced out just enough that you didn't feel like you were living inside someone else's life. The air smelled like pine and damp soil in the evenings, and there was a line of woods behind the last row of homes that made the whole area feel tucked away. The neighbors seemed nice, but they were the kind of nice that stays behind doors. The quick wave while taking the trash out. The polite nod when you pass someone checking their mailbox. A short morning, and then they keep walking. No long talks, no welcoming committee, no forced friendliness. Honestly, I like that. I'm not the type who needs to be folded into a community immediately, and after the stress of my job, quiet feels like medicine. I'm a nurse, and nursing doesn't really let you be a person for 8 or 12 hours. You're a set of moving hands and constant decisions, always measuring time in vital signs and medication schedules. Some days are calm, and the most dramatic thing you deal with is someone complaining about hospital food. Other days you go home with your shoulders locked up, your feet aching, and that buzzing feeling in your head that means you spent the day running on adrenaline. When I'm off the clock, I don't want excitement. I want predictable. For the first few days after I moved in, everything was exactly that. Predictable. Peaceful. Almost boring in a way that felt safe. My routine was simple. Wake up early, shower, get dressed, throw my hair up, grab a travel mug of coffee and head to work. Come home tired, eat something quick, maybe scroll on my phone for a bit, then sleep. Repeat. I didn't decorate much yet. I hadn't fully unpacked the last couple of boxes. But even that was comforting, like the house was still blank and hadn't started holding any bad memories. At night, the neighborhood sounded like nothing. No sirens, no shouting, no cars racing, just a few insects, maybe a distant dog bark, and the soft sound of trees moving when there was wind. When I first moved in, that quiet was so nice. It almost made me emotional. It felt like I had found a place where nothing could reach me. I really thought moving there could be a fresh start. I was wrong. It stopped being predictable a couple of nights ago. I woke up to knocking. Not a normal knock. Not a polite tap-tap you can ignore because you're half asleep and assume it's your imagination. It was insistent, fast, constant. Like someone's hand wasn't getting tired at all. Like the knocking wasn't asking permission, it was demanding a response. I sat up in bed, instantly irritated. When you work in healthcare, you start guarding your sleep like it's a resource you can't replace. Sleep isn't just rest. It's how you survive the next shift without making a mistake. The knocking didn't stop. I checked my phone. 3 a.m. on the dot. That made my irritation tilt into confusion. Who in the world is pounding on someone's door at 3 in the morning in a quiet neighborhood like this? I got out of bed, grabbed my robe, and walked down the hall toward the front door. I didn't even think about a weapon or calling someone first, which feels stupid now. At the time, I just assumed it was someone confused or drunk, or maybe a neighbor with some emergency. The knocking got louder the closer I got, like whoever was out there was timing it with my steps. It made my skin feel tight, but I still told myself it was nothing. I opened the door hard enough that it rattled, ready to snap at whoever was doing it. And then I froze. A little girl stood on my porch. She was blonde, with big green eyes. Not a toddler, but not a teenager either. Somewhere in between. Her hair looked brushed. Her face looked clean. Her clothes weren't torn or dirty. She didn't look like a kid who had been outside all night. She looked healthy and taken care of, like she'd come straight out of a warm house. She was standing close enough to the door that if I'd opened it faster, I might have hit her. The sight of a child at that hour flipped a switch in my brain. My irritation vanished instantly. That's what nursing does to you. You can be half asleep, but if you see someone vulnerable, your body goes into help mode. "Hey," I said, softer now. "Are you okay? Where are your parents?" She didn't answer. She just stared at me. There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Not the kind of pause where a shy kid is working up the courage to speak. More like the kind where they're waiting for you to do something first. Her eyes didn't flicker. She didn't glance behind her. She didn't look scared. We stood there in silence so long I started hearing details around us. Crickets somewhere down the street, a faint rustle in the trees, my own breathing. I asked again, clearer, trying to keep calm. "Sweetheart, are you lost? Do you live around here?" She took a slow step forward. That movement made my body tense, just a little, because it didn't feel like a normal child stepping closer for comfort. It felt measured, like she was closing distance for a reason. Then she spoke, quiet and flat. "You're next." It took my brain a second to register the words because they didn't fit anything. Kids don't normally say that. Not like that. Before I could ask what she meant, she pushed me. Not a playful shove. Not a gentle push. A sharp little shove to my stomach that made me step back. And then she ran. She sprinted off my porch and into the yard, moving fast for a kid her size. I followed her with my eyes, stunned, watching her blonde hair bounce as she ran across the grass and disappeared into the woods behind the houses. There wasn't even a hesitation at the tree line. She didn't slow down. She didn't look back. She just vanished into the dark like she belonged there. I stood in my doorway for a long moment, feeling cold air creep under my robe. I didn't chase her. I didn't call out. I couldn't decide if I'd just been threatened or pranked. A part of me wanted to slam the door and pretend it hadn't happened. Another part wanted to step out into the yard and make sure there wasn't a child lost in the woods. But the way she moved didn't look lost. It looked purposeful. I finally closed and locked the door, checked it twice, then went through the house, turning on lights and looking out windows like I expected to see someone else nearby. I didn't see anything. No adults. No car headlights. No flashlights in the woods. I told myself it was probably a prank. A kid who dared herself to scare the new neighbor. Maybe the local kids had decided I was the easy target because I lived alone. It wasn't comforting, but it was at least normal. Still, I didn't sleep well after that. Every time I started drifting off, I'd feel that jump in my chest like someone had knocked again. I kept picturing her face, those wide eyes, the way she said the words like she was reading them. Eventually, morning came, and I went to work. My shift was busy enough that I could push the whole thing to the back of my mind. When you're dealing with real emergencies, your brain doesn't have room to replay weird porch encounters. But the next night, it happened again. The same knocking, relentless and impatient, like my front door had insulted someone and now it had to pay for it. I sat up, already tense. I checked my phone. 3 a.m. Exactly. My stomach sank. I knew who it would be before I even got out of bed. That's what scared me. Not the idea of a child outside. The certainty, the repetition, the timing. I walked to the door, slower this time. I didn't stomp like I had the night before. I didn't swing it open angrily. I stood behind it and listened first. Nothing but the knocking. I opened the door. She was there again. Same girl, same blonde hair, same green eyes, same calm blank face. Only this time she was wearing a different outfit. Still neat, still clean, like she changed clothes on purpose. Like this was a planned visit. I tried to keep my voice steady. Why are you here? Where do you live? She stared at me. The silence stretched. Then she stepped forward and said the exact same words. You're next. Then the push. Then she ran into the woods again. I stood there with my hands on the doorframe, feeling my heart pounding too hard for what should have been a simple moment. I was angry now. Not at the child exactly, but at the situation. At being pulled out of sleep. At being forced to engage with something that didn't make sense. I closed the door and locked it. Then I checked the back door, then the windows. Then I turned on lights and walked the house again, more out of panic than logic. That night, I barely slept. The next day, I tried to be practical. I told myself, you're a nurse. You're not a person who panics over nothing. A child is knocking on your door. That is a real thing. So treat it like a real thing. I asked around a little when I saw a neighbor outside in the afternoon, a middle-aged woman pulling weeds near her front steps. I asked if she knew of any kids who might be playing pranks. She barely looked up. She gave me a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes and said she didn't know. Something about her tone made me stop talking. Like she wasn't lying exactly. But she also didn't want to help. Like she didn't want to be part of whatever I was describing. That made me feel more alone than I already did. And that night, the knocking came again at 3 a.m. Same girl, different clothes, same words, same push, same sprint into the woods, and then it became routine. Every single night, always at 3 a.m., always the same knock, the same pattern, the same insistence. If I tried to ignore it, it got louder. Not just more annoying loud, it escalated like something was trying to force me to respond. I tried covering my head with a pillow. It didn't matter. The sound cut through everything. I started sleeping with my phone in my hand. I started leaving the porch light on. I started telling myself I would record it, that I would gather proof. But every time I made plans like that, the moment I heard the knocking, my body went into that half-awake panic state, and I just moved without thinking. I kept opening the door because I couldn't stand the knocking, but also because part of me still worried about the girl. What if someone was forcing her? What if she was being threatened? What if she was sick or drugged or lost in some bigger situation I didn't understand? There was also this thought that I didn't like admitting. What if something bad would happen if I didn't open it? Not because the girl would do something, but because the knocking itself felt like it wanted a response, like it was training me. Each night she looked clean. Different outfit, same neatness. No mud on her shoes, no dirt on her knees, no leaves caught in her hair, even though she ran into the woods every time. That detail bothered me more than I wanted it to. If you run through woods at night, you don't stay pristine. I started drinking more coffee at work just to stay functional. I started snapping at coworkers in small ways. I stopped feeling like I was living in my home and started feeling like I was just surviving nights inside it. Then last night happened. Last night was the worst night I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing, and I'm not exaggerating. I know people throw that phrase around, but I mean it. I would take a double shift, with no break over reliving last night. At first, it started like all the other nights. The knock at 3 a.m. I woke up with my heart already racing, like my body had learned the schedule too. I sat in bed for a second, trying to convince myself not to open the door, trying to force myself to call the police instead. But the knocking wouldn't stop. It didn't even pause. It just kept going, steady and relentless. I could feel it in my chest, like each knock hit my ribs from the inside. I got up and walked to the door. My hands were shaking when I reached for the lock. I told myself, open it, talk to her, tell her you're calling someone. Try to keep her there this time. Try to get her name. Something. I opened the door. She was there. But this time my eyes didn't go straight to her face. They went to her hand. A knife. A small knife, but real. The metal catching the porch light. Her arm hung at her side as if she was holding a toy, not a weapon. She didn't look excited. She didn't look angry. She looked blank, like always. My throat went tight. I started to open my mouth to speak, to ask why she had it, to tell her to put it down. She didn't wait. She stepped forward and sliced my arm. It happened so fast that I didn't feel the pain at first. I felt the shock of contact, like someone had slapped me. Then warmth spread, and the sting followed, sharp and immediate. I stumbled back. My hand flew to the cut, and my fingers came away wet. The girl didn't stay to watch. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything else. She turned and ran into the woods like she'd done every other night. I stood in the doorway, bleeding, staring at the dark tree line, trying to process that a child had just cut me and vanished. My mind tried to assign it to reality and couldn't. Everything felt too wrong, too scripted, too clean. The cut wasn't deep enough to kill me, but it was deep enough to hurt for hours, deep enough to bleed steadily. Deep enough that I had to clean it properly, bandage it, and keep checking it like a nurse checking someone else's injury. Except this time, the patient was me. After I cleaned it, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights on and stared at my own arm. I kept thinking the same questions, over and over. Why? Why do this every night? Why the same time? Why the same words? Why the push? Why the woods? Why wait several nights before turning it into a physical injury? It didn't feel like random kid behavior. It felt like escalation, like steps, And that brought me to the worst question. What comes next? If the first phase was knocking and saying, "You're next," and the second phase was a knife, what's the third? I haven't been able to stop thinking about tonight. I know 3 a.m. is coming. I know I'm going to hear the knocking. I can already feel my body tensing when I look at the clock, like it's counting down without me. I don't know what to do, and I need to hear something honest, not just comforting. Do I call the police now before it happens again? Do I set up cameras? Do I leave the house for the night and stay somewhere else? Do I ignore the knocking no matter what and risk it getting worse? Do I open the door again and risk another cut or worse? I moved here for a fresh start, and now I feel trapped in a routine that belongs to something else. She knocks every night at 3. I'm expecting her again tonight. What should I do? Story 6. I didn't think much of the letter at first. It was shoved halfway under my front door, the corner bent like someone had pushed it in slowly and quietly, the way you would if you didn't want the paper to make that sharp scraping sound against the wood. No stamp, no return address, no envelope with a logo, just a plain white envelope with my name written across the front in blocky, uneven handwriting. I live alone in a third-floor flat, the kind of place where you hear the elevator cables in the wall sometimes, where the hallway smells faintly like old carpet and cleaning products, where people keep to themselves. I don't really talk to my neighbors. Nobody knocks on my door unless it's a delivery. And I wasn't expecting anything. So yes, it was weird. But it wasn't terrifying. Not yet. Not in that immediate life or death way. In my head, it was still in the category of odd, but explainable. Wrong unit. Someone in the building trying to be funny. A neighbor who thinks this is how you start a conversation. Someone confusing my name with someone else's. I picked it up with one hand and looked down the hallway out of habit, even though I knew it would be empty. It was. The motion sensor light at the far end of the hall was still on, and the hallway was quiet enough that I could hear the soft buzz of the light. I closed the door and opened the envelope at the kitchen counter. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No letterhead, no signature, no extra pages folded behind it. Just one line written in the same blocky hand. You forgot me, but I didn't forget you. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for the words to rearrange into something that felt normal. They didn't. It was one of those sentences that sounds like it should belong to a relationship, to a friendship, to a family argument, something personal, something that assumes history. I tried to summon any history that made sense. Exes, old friends, someone I'd cut off. But if it was any of those people, why deliver it like this? Why no name? Why not a text? I felt a small prickle at the back of my neck, more annoyance than fear. It felt dramatic. It felt like someone wanted a reaction. So I did what I always do when I don't want my mind to spiral. I reduced it to trash. I crumpled the paper into a tight ball and threw it into the bin. I washed my hands. I made dinner. I put on the TV, something mindless, and I tried to keep my thoughts moving so they wouldn't settle on the letter like a sore tooth you keep poking with your tongue. It worked for a while. Enough that I started to feel stupid for even thinking about it. Then I went to bed. I've always been particular about my bedtime routine, not in a perfectly curated way. more in a way that says if I do the same small actions in the same order, my body understands it's time to shut down. Lock the front door, check the chain, turn off the kitchen light, fill a glass of water, and leave it on my nightstand. Close my bedroom door fully. It's a small thing, but a closed door helps me sleep. It creates a boundary. That night, I did all of it. And sometime around 2:17 a.m., I woke up. There wasn't a loud noise, no crash from the kitchen, no shout from the hallway, no phone buzzing. Just that sudden, sharp awareness, like someone had reached into my sleep and yanked me back. My eyes opened, and the room was dark, but I could still make out the outline of my bedroom door. It was open, just a few inches. Not wide, not inviting, just cracked enough to change the shape of the darkness beyond it. That shouldn't have been possible. I close it every night. I don't close it lazily. I pull it until it latches. I always do. I sat up slowly, feeling my heart pick up speed like it had been waiting for a reason. I listened. Nothing. The flat was silent in that way that makes silence feel like a thing, not just an absence. No footsteps, no creak in the hall, no elevator noise. Even the building's usual little settling sound seemed muted. I told myself I hadn't latched it properly. Old building, warped frame, doors that swell and shift with temperature. It happens. Still, I got out of bed and walked to the door barefoot, the floor cold under my feet. I pushed the door shut. This time I made sure I heard the latch click. Then, without really thinking, I turned the lock. I stood there for a few seconds, hand still on the knob, staring at the wood grain, like I expected it to move. Nothing did. I went back to bed, but I didn't fall asleep easily. I kept imagining that crack of darkness, and I kept noticing how loud my own breathing sounded in the quiet. The next morning, I got up and went into the kitchen on autopilot. Coffee, toast, the usual. My brain felt slightly foggy, like it does after you wake up in the middle of the night and never fully recover. That's when I saw it. The letter. Not in the bin. Not crumpled. Not ripped up like I knew I had done. It was on my kitchen counter, laid flat and smoothed out, like someone had pressed it carefully with their hands. The paper was crisp. The creases from where I crumpled it were gone. Even the edges looked clean. I stood there staring at it until my coffee machine beeped behind me. My stomach tightened, and I felt a cold wave move through me. Not the dramatic, I'm in a horror movie kind of fear. The quieter kind. The kind that makes you suddenly very aware that you live alone. I picked the paper up and turned it over. Blank. I checked it like it might have hidden writing in the folds. Nothing. Then I checked the bin. My trash was still there. Empty food packaging, paper towels, whatever I'd thrown away. The crumpled ball of paper wasn't there. I live alone. I knew I didn't do that. That was the moment where the story stops being weird mail and it starts becoming something else. Something my brain didn't want to name. I checked everything after that. Every window, every lock, every latch. I checked for signs of someone breaking in, because the mind needs an explanation, and that explanation needs to be physical. If a person did this, then it was a security problem. If it wasn't a person, then I didn't know what it was. No forced entry, no scratches around the locks, no broken windows, no missing items. My laptop was where I left it. My wallet was still on the dresser. Nothing looked disturbed. I checked the carbon monoxide detector because I've read enough stories to know how easily your brain can be tricked by poisoning. I checked the batteries. I replaced them anyway. Then, still unsettled, I replaced the whole unit and opened the windows for a while, even though it was cold outside. No alarm, no fault. I checked the hallway camera downstairs, the one the building manager installed after some packages went missing last year. It's a basic camera pointed at the stairwell and the elevator. I stood there in the lobby, scrolling through the footage from the night before, pausing and rewinding like I was looking for a ghost in the pixels. No one came up to my floor. No one but me. I should have gone to the police right then. I know that now. Even if it sounded stupid, even if they wouldn't do much, even if they'd just make a note. At least then, someone else would know it happened. Instead, I stayed. And that was my mistake. That night, the second letter came. Same method. Slipped under the door. The difference was that I was awake this time. I was on the sofa, TV on low, pretending I wasn't watching the hallway every few seconds. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but my body didn't agree. My body kept staying ready, like it expected something. Then I heard it. A soft scrape against the bottom of the door. Slow, controlled, not a shove. More like someone carefully pushing paper across the surface so it doesn't tear, so it doesn't make noise. My whole body went still. No footsteps followed. No shadow appeared under the door. The hallway stayed quiet. I waited longer than I want to admit before I moved. I was afraid that if I got up too fast, I'd see something through the peephole I couldn't handle. Eventually, I forced myself to stand, walk to the door, and look down. Another envelope. This one was thicker than the first. Still plain. Still no stamp. I took it to the kitchen, opened it with trembling fingers, and unfolded the paper inside. You used to talk to me every night. Do you remember now? That sentence hit me in a place I didn't expect. It wasn't fear first. It was confusion. Then a sudden nausea that made my throat tighten. Because I didn't remember. I sat there holding the paper for a long time, trying to force my mind to produce the missing memory. Used to talk to me every night. Who? When? As an adult? As a teenager? As a kid? The words felt familiar in an emotional way. Like when someone says a phrase you haven't heard in years and your body recognizes it before your brain does. I threw the paper in the sink, turned the faucet on, and watched the ink smear and bleed into the water. It was a childish move, like destroying it would make it less real. I stood there until the water soaked the whole sheet and the paper started to tear. Then I went to bed with the lights on. That's when the dreams started. Or at least that's what I told myself they were at first, because dream is the easiest label. If it's a dream, you can live with it. If it's something else, you have to change your life. It started the same way every time. I would wake up in my bed, eyes open, heart pounding, and I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. I'd had it once or twice before in my life. I knew the concept. Your brain wakes up before your body does, and your mind fills the gap with fear. Except this felt different. I would be staring at the corner of my room, and the corner wouldn't look empty. It wasn't a shape. It wasn't a person. It was just darker darkness, like the corner had depth. Like it wasn't simply where two walls met. Like the room's geometry was wrong. And every night it was closer. At first, it was just the corner. Then it felt like it was slightly off the corner, leaning toward me. Then closer still, like a slow tide. I could feel it more than see it, like a pressure in the air. I would tell myself to blink, to move my fingers, to jerk my body awake. But I couldn't. I could only stare and wait for the moment I could move again. By the third day, I wasn't sleeping properly at all. I kept lights on. I kept the TV on. I drank too much caffeine during the day because I was exhausted. Then regretted it, because caffeine makes anxiety worse and my mind was already racing. Then I noticed something else. Old photos. I was scrolling through my phone during one of those jittery moments where you can't focus on anything, but you also can't stop moving. I opened my camera roll and saw photos I didn't remember taking. Dozens of them. All in my flat. All taken at night. Some were photos of empty rooms. My kitchen, shot from the hallway. My living room, shot from near the front door. My bedroom door, slightly open, taken from a low angle like the phone had been held near someone's hip. That was unsettling enough. Then I found the one that made my blood go cold. In the photo, I was asleep in my bed. It was taken from the corner of the room. My face was turned toward the wall. My blankets were pulled up to my chest. My mouth was slightly open. It was a normal picture of a sleeping person, except for one thing. I did not take it, and nobody should have been in that corner. I stared at it for so long my eyes started to water. I zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. I looked for anything that could prove it was fake, a trick, a glitch, a screenshot from somewhere else. But it was my bed, my blanket, my wall, my cheap nightstand, my glass of water, my room, and the angle was wrong. The phone had been held by someone standing in the corner, looking down at me. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where I finally accept that someone is coming into my flat. But even that explanation didn't fit perfectly, because the front door lock wasn't damaged, the windows were fine, and the hallway camera downstairs didn't show anyone coming up. And then another memory surfaced. Not because I wanted it to, but because the second letter had cracked something open. When I was a kid, I used to talk to someone. My parents called it an imaginary friend. They thought it was cute. They'd smile when they heard me whispering in my bedroom at night. Sometimes my mom would say, "Who are you talking to?" And I'd answer casually, like it was normal. I remember sitting on my bed facing the corner, telling stories, laughing softly, whispering like I didn't want to wake the house. Then I stopped. Not because I outgrew it, because one night it answered back. That memory had been buried so deep I didn't even know it was there until the letter dragged it into the light. I could suddenly recall the exact sensation of cold fear in a child's chest, the way your stomach drops when something you thought was pretend suddenly isn't. I didn't remember what it said. I just remembered that it wasn't my voice, and it wasn't my parents. And it came from the corner where I'd been talking, and I remembered how quickly I stopped talking after that, how I started sleeping with my back against the wall instead of facing the corner, how I refused to sleep with the door open, how my parents assumed I was just growing up. I had completely forgotten it, until the fourth letter. This one wasn't under the door. It was on my bedside table when I woke up, right next to my phone. The paper was flat and smooth like it had been placed with care, like someone had taken time to set it down exactly where my hand would naturally reach when I woke up. You promised I could stay. I didn't even read it twice. The moment I saw it, my brain snapped into a kind of clarity I hadn't felt in days. A pure survival clarity. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't wrong mail. This wasn't a bored neighbor. This wasn't even just a break-in. This was something that had been waiting for me since childhood. I didn't sleep in the flat that night. I didn't pack. I didn't take extra clothes. I grabbed my wallet, my keys, and my phone and left like the building was on fire. I walked fast down the hallway and took the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator because I didn't want to stand in a box of mirrors in silence. I went to a hotel across town. I chose it randomly, not caring about price, just needing somewhere with lights and people and cameras, somewhere public. I checked in and forced myself to breathe. I remember thinking, okay, this is how you fix it. You leave. Whatever this is, it's tied to the flat. It's tied to that space. You're safe now. Then I walked into the room, shut the door, turned on the lights, and dropped my bag on the bed. There was already a piece of paper on the pillow. Flat, smooth, carefully placed. You can't forget me again. My hands went numb. The room spun slightly like my body had trouble staying upright. I stared at the paper until the edges blurred. Then I grabbed it with 2 fingers, as if touching it directly would contaminate me. I checked the room like a person in a panic. I opened the closet. I checked behind the curtains. I checked under the bed like I was 10 years old again. I checked the bathroom, the shower, the space behind the door. The room was empty. The hallway outside was quiet. The hotel was normal. But the letter was there. That was when I understood something that made my stomach turn in a new way. It didn't matter where I went. It wasn't in the flat. It was with me. I didn't sleep. I sat in the desk chair with all the lights on, staring at the room like if I watched every inch, I could stop something from happening. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up anyway. I don't know how to explain it. I didn't fall asleep. I didn't lie down. But it happened the same way it had been happening in my flat. 1 second I was awake, and the next second I was coming to with that jolting awareness, like something had pulled me out of a place I didn't remember entering. I was still in the chair, but my body felt heavy, like my muscles had been turned off and then back on again. My skin was cold. My mouth was dry. And I knew without looking that something was closer. The room wasn't different visually. It didn't look like anything had moved. But the air felt occupied in a way that made my eyes burn. Like the space beside the bed wasn't empty anymore. I couldn't see it properly. I still can't describe what it looked like, because my brain refuses to form the shape. The best I can say is that the darkness near the bed looked thicker, like it had mass, like it wasn't just shadows from the lamp. I tried to stand up, but my legs didn't respond at first. That panic hit again, the child panic, the primal fear of being trapped in your own body while something is close. And then, right before I could finally move, I heard it whisper. Not from across the room, not from the hallway, right next to my ear. You said I could stay forever. I didn't scream. I didn't even speak. My throat locked like it had been glued shut. When my body finally moved again, I bolted out of the chair so fast it scraped the floor and slammed into the wall. I turned in circles, looking for something solid to fight, something human to throw out of the room. There was nothing. Just a normal hotel room. Normal walls, normal carpet, normal light, and the paper still on the bed, like proof that this wasn't just my mind. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. I haven't gone back home. I don't even know if I can. I'm sitting in another hotel now, farther away, like distance matters, even though I already know it doesn't. Every night, I wake up at exactly 2:17 a.m., and every night it's closer. Last night, it wasn't in the corner anymore. It was beside the bed. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel the attention, the way you can feel someone staring at you even when your eyes are closed, like something was waiting for me to acknowledge it, waiting for me to remember whatever promise I made as a child, whatever stupid, fearless thing kids say when they don't understand consequences. I don't know how to break something I don't fully understand. I don't know if this is something psychological that's spiraled into obsession, or if it's something else entirely. I don't know if I'm being followed by a real person, or if my own brain is manufacturing proof, or if I brought something back with me from a place I've forgotten. All I know is that the letters keep finding me, and the time never changes. 2:17 a.m. And the whisper last night felt close enough that I could feel breath on my skin, even though I don't want to believe that's possible. If anyone has experienced anything like this, I need you to tell me what you did. Not the comforting version, not the you'll be okay version, the honest version. Because whatever this is, it doesn't feel like it wants to scare me anymore. It feels like it wants me to remember.